The palace was never truly silent. Even at this hour, long past midnight, its ancient stones hummed with the low, restless energy of the wolves who called it home. It was a sound I knew well after 6 months of moving through its halls like a ghost. A sound of power, of vigilance, of secrets held too close to the chest. My name is Alara. I am a servant here, or at least that is the face I show. Tonight, the hum felt different. It felt like a storm gathering, a pressure building in the air before the first crack of thunder. It felt like being watched. I moved quickly through the eastern corridor, my worn shoes whispering over cold marble. My heartbeat was a frantic drum against my ribs, but my face was a mask of calm. In one hand, I carried a basket of discarded linen, the perfect excuse for a maid to be out so late. In the other, hidden beneath the cloth, I carried something far more precious. A small pouch of moon-blessed herbs, a vial of distilled spring water, and the desperate, fragile hope that it would be enough. Finn was dying. The young rogue had been brought to our hidden clearing by his companions just before dusk, a vicious gash across his side from a royal patrol's silver-tipped claw. The patrols had orders to execute rogues on sight. They called it maintaining order. I called it murder, and I couldn't let another one happen, not tonight. As I neared the small, discreet servants' door that led to the forest, the feeling of being watched intensified. It was a prickling sensation at the nape of my neck, a cold certainty that settled deep in my bones. I didn't dare look behind me. Looking would be an admission. Looking would confirm the fear. But I could smell him. Alpha King Kalen. His scent was everywhere in this palace, of course. It was the scent of authority, of ancient oak and cold iron, of a winter sky just before the snow falls. But this was different. This wasn't the faint, lingering trace left on a throne or in a hallway. This was immediate, close. He was here, in the shadows of this very corridor, and he was following me. My blood ran cold. For 6 months I had been a phantom, careful, quiet, invisible. I tended to my duties, kept my eyes lowered, and slipped into the forest under the cover of darkness to do the real work, to heal the wolves his kingdom threw away. How long had he known? Was this the night it all ended? I paused at the iron-banded door, my hand hovering over the handle. Every instinct screamed to run, to abandon the herbs, to save myself. But Finn's face, pale and tight with pain, swam before my eyes. I saw the other faces, too. The elderly Omega, Lyra, who'd lost her pack. The young she-wolf, Sable, whose only crime was a weak shift. All the broken, forgotten souls who depended on me. If I turned back now, I signed their death warrants. I took a deep, steadying breath, pushed the door open, and stepped into the biting cold of the night. The forest air was a shock, sharp with pine and the damp earth. I didn't run. Running would trigger the predator in him. Instead, I walked with purpose, my pace measured, heading for the tree line as if I had every right to be there. The basket of linen swung gently from my arm, a maid on an errand, nothing more. But the weight of his gaze was a physical thing between my shoulder blades. He was still there. He had followed me out. I reached the sanctuary of the trees, the dense canopy swallowing the moonlight. Only then did I allow myself a glance back. Nothing. No looming shadow, no flash of golden eyes. Just the silent, imposing wall of the palace against the starry sky. The emptiness was somehow more terrifying. I moved deeper into the woods, my steps finding the hidden path I'd walked 100 times. The further I went, the more the servant's posture fell away. My shoulders straightened, my stride lengthened, eating up the ground with a grace I never showed within the palace. This forest, this sacred, off-limits ground, was the one place I didn't have to pretend. The clearing was a small, moon-drenched pocket of calm. Finn lay on a bed of moss, his breathing shallow and wet. Lyra was pressing a bundled cloth to his wound, her hands stained dark. Sable paced at the clearing's edge, her eyes wide with fear. "Ilara," Lyra breathed, her voice thick with relief. "The bleeding, it won't stop." "I'm here," I said, my voice suddenly steady. This was my purpose, This was the truth of me. I knelt beside Finn, my hands already moving, pulling the precious herbs from their hiding place. "Hold on, Finn. Just hold on." I worked quickly, crushing the herbs, mixing them with the water, whispering the old words my mother had taught me. Words of binding, of mending, of soul-deep healing that had been forbidden for 2 centuries. A soft silver light began to emanate from my palms as I pressed them over the wound. It was a risk. This magic had a signature, a scent of its own, wild lavender and ozone that any powerful wolf could sense. But it was the only thing that could counter silver poisoning. Finn gasped, his body arching as the magic knit flesh and staunched blood. The terrible rattling sound in his chest eased. "That's it," I murmured. "Come back to us." It was then I felt it. Not a sound, but a shift in the very atmosphere of the clearing. The night birds fell silent. The wind died. A presence, immense and undeniable, filled the space at the edge of the trees. I didn't need to look up. I knew. "Finish the binding," I said to Lyra, my voice low. "Take him to the fallback cave, now." "Ilara," Sable started, terror in her whisper. "Go." They moved, hauling a dazed but living Finn to his feet, melting into the shadows with the efficiency of the perpetually hunted. I remained kneeling, slowly wiping my hands on my gray dress, the silver light fading from my skin. I could feel his eyes on me, dissecting me, seeing past the servant's garb to the power I had just revealed. "You can come out now, Alpha King," I said, my voice echoing softly in the silent clearing. "I know you've been following me. I felt you in the corridor." For a moment, there was only the sound of my own heart. Then he stepped into the moonlight. Kalen, Alpha King of the Northern Territories, was a monument carved from shadow and authority. He was taller, broader than any wolf had a right to be, and he moved with a predator's lethal grace that was completely at odds with the stillness he now possessed. His face, all sharp angles and forbidding strength, was unreadable. But his eyes were a burning, intense gold, and they were fixed on me with a focus that stole the air from my lungs. He didn't speak. He simply stood there, his presence a wave of dominance that would have forced any other wolf to their knees. I forced myself to stand, to meet that gaze, even as every cell in my body recognized the apex predator before me. "Who are you?" The question wasn't loud, but it vibrated with raw alpha command. It was a voice used to being answered, instantly and without question. I swallowed, my throat dry. "I am Ilara, a maid in your household." "Do not insult my intelligence." He took one step forward, and the distance between us seemed to halve. His scent enveloped me, oak and iron, and a strange electric current that made my head spin. "I watched you heal that rogue with forbidden magic. I smelled it. Soul-binding, an art lost to history, erased." His gaze swept over me, cold and assessing. "So, I will ask you once more, who are you and what are you?" The truth was a dangerous living thing in my throat. For 6 months I had guarded it with my life, but looking at him now, feeling the strange, unnerving pull in my chest that had nothing to do with fear, I knew the time for hiding was over. He had seen the core of me. "My name is Ilara Azalumin. My people were healers, soul-binders, weavers of connection, not conquest. I drew myself up, finding a strength I didn't know I had. And your grandfather, King Vorian, had mine slaughtered to the last soul for it. I am what he failed to erase." His expression didn't change, but I saw a slight flicker in those gold eyes, a shock quickly masked. "The lumen," he repeated, the word sounding ancient and dangerous. A children's tale, a warning against weakness. "A history rewritten by the victor," I shot back, a flicker of my own anger breaking through the fear. We were no threat to his throne, only to his lies. He moved then, so fast I barely registered it. He was suddenly just an arm's length away, his scent enveloping me, oak and iron, and a strange electric current that made my head spin. "And you? What threat are you?" harboring rogues, defying my laws, practicing magic that is an abomination to our kind, in my own territory. I held my ground, though it took every ounce of my will. Is healing an abomination? Is mercy a crime? Those rogues are only rogues because your laws leave them no other choice. They are the wounded, the lost, the ones your perfect system of strength discards. You sit on a throne built on the bones of the peaceful, Alpha King, and you call me an abomination? A low growl rumbled in his chest, a sound of pure, unleashed power. The air crackled with it. You speak of things you do not understand. I understand that I just saved a life you would have ended, I whispered, the fight leaving me as suddenly as it came, replaced by a wave of crushing exhaustion. I understand that I have saved 43 such lives, and I understand that you now have a choice. His head tilted, a predator considering prey. The silence in the Alpha King's private study was thicker than the palace walls. Kalen stood before the arched window, his back to the room, his hands clasped tightly behind him. The first gray light of dawn was creeping over the eastern forests, painting the world in shades of doubt. He had not slept. Sleep was impossible when your entire reality had been upended in a single night. Alara of the Lumen. The name was a curse from the old stories, a whispered legend of a gentle people who could touch the soul itself. His tutors had taught him they were a danger, a weakness that had been mercifully purged from the world by his grandfather's strong will. Vorian the Unifier had erased them to strengthen the packs, to ensure only the strong survived. But the woman in the clearing, she had not been weak. Terrified, yes. Defiant, absolutely. But there had been a strength in her that had nothing to do with tooth or claw. It was a strength of conviction, a fire that burned with a pure silver light. The light that had spilled from her hands and saved a life. And then she had said it. Why your wolf has been drawn to a mere servant for months. A low growl escaped him, vibrating in his chest. It was true. For months, a scent, lavender and rain-soaked earth, had haunted him. It had been a ghost in his halls, a distraction during council meetings, an itch beneath his skin that his wolf could not stop seeking. He had told himself it was an anomaly, a strange perfume from the kitchens, a flower in the gardens. He, the Alpha King, ruler of the Northern Territories for 150 years, had not dared to name it for what it was, mate. The word was a bomb in his mind. It was impossible. The moon goddess did not gift mates to kings like him. Kings were given crowns and burdens and the lonely, unending weight of rule. He had accepted that long ago. His purpose was his pack, his territory, his legacy, not this. Not a lumen, not a woman who broke his most fundamental laws with every breath she took. And yet his wolf had been certain the moments he saw her magic. A deep, primal recognition had roared to life within him, shaking the foundations of his control. Ours, the beast inside him insisted. Mine. You summon me, my king? The voice, steady and familiar, came from the doorway. Cyrus, his beta, his oldest friend, the wolf who had stood beside him through every battle, every difficult decision. Cyrus's face was lined with concern and hardness Kalen knew all too well. His beta had been tracking the rogue sympathizer for weeks. He would have reports from last night's patrols. Kalen did not turn. The trackers, what did they find? A pause. Cyrus was choosing his words carefully. The scent trail led deep into the forest, into the old growth where the pack bonds grow thin. It vanished near the Whispering Falls. The rogues we've been hunting, they're like ghosts, Kalen. They know the land too well. And there was another sense there. Go on. It was faint, almost masked by pine and water, but it was magic, Kalen. Old magic, forbidden magic. Cyrus's voice dropped. The trackers said it smelled of lightning and flowers after a storm. They said it made their wolves uneasy. Lightning and flowers. Lavender and ozone. Kalen closed his eyes. She had been clever, leading them to the falls, where the rushing water and ancient magic would scramble her trail, but she hadn't been clever enough to hide the truth from him. And the maid, Kalen forced his voice to remain neutral, disinterested, the one from the eastern wing, Alara. He felt Cyrus's stare on his back. Gone. Her quarters were empty, bed unslept in. She never returned from her errand. Another pause, heavier this time. Kalen, the trackers believe the magic scent and the maid scent are connected. They think she may be more than just a sympathizer. They think she may be the source. Kalen finally turned. Cyrus was watching him, his brown eyes sharp, missing nothing. His beta knew him too well. He could see the suspicion forming, the dangerous questions brewing. A missing maid, forbidden magic, a king who had been acting strangely, distracted for months. "What are your thoughts, Cyrus?" Kalen asked, moving to his heavy oak desk, a barrier between them. Cyrus's jaw tightened. "My thought is that we have a cancer in our midst, a practitioner of the old arts, the soul arts, hiding among us, turning our wolves against us, sabotaging our patrols by saving the very filth we cleanse from our lands." He stepped forward, his passion rising. "The laws are clear, Kalen. Soul binding is an abomination. It twists the natural order, creates false bonds, manipulates the will. Your grandfather eradicated it for a reason. This witch must be found and executed, publicly, to remind the packs of the consequence of such treachery." Every word was a nail in a coffin. Cyrus was repeating doctrine, history as it had been written by Vorian, the same history the woman in the clearing had called a lie. Is healing an abomination? Is mercy a crime? Her words echoed in his head, clashing violently with Cyrus's. And what if the laws are wrong? The question left Kalen's lips before he could stop it. It was a whisper, but it seemed to roar in the quiet room. Cyrus froze. The concern on his face hardened into something colder, more alarmed. "My king?" Kalen waved a dismissive hand, retreating behind the mask of the king. "A rhetorical question, Beta. The laws are the foundation of our stability. I know this." He sat in his chair, the weight of it feeling heavier than ever. "Triple the patrols in the western forest. I want the rogue nest found and eliminated. As for the maid issue a warrant for her arrest, sedition and practice of forbidden arts. But I want her alive, Cyrus. Do you understand? Alive and unharmed. Her knowledge may be useful." Cyrus's eyes narrowed slightly. The order to keep her alive was unusual. Execution was the standard penalty. "Useful, my king? If she can heal rogues, perhaps she can heal our own wounded warriors more efficiently. Her methods could be studied, then disposed of. But we need her conscious to learn them. See it done." It was a flimsy excuse, but it was an order from his alpha. Cyrus dipped his head, though dissatisfaction radiated from him. "As you command. I will see to it personally." "Good." Dismissed. Cyrus turned to leave, but stopped at the door. He didn't look back. "Kalen, be careful. The council is already restless. They smell weakness like blood in the water. A missing witch, rogues growing bold. They will say your focus is failing. They will say the king is being led astray by a scent." Then he was gone, leaving Kalen alone with the accusation hanging in the air. Led astray by a scent. He was. He knew he was. But it was more than a scent. It was a pull, a connection that defied reason and history and law. It was a thread of silver light tied around his heart, and it was pulling him inexorably towards the western ridge and the setting sun. The day passed in a blur of tense council meetings and hollow reports. Elder Theon, a wolf so old he had served Kalen's grandfather, spoke at length about the importance of purity of power and unyielding strength. His eyes, milky with age, seemed to see too much. High Commander Jax reported increased rogue activity, his frustration palpable. The warrants for Ilara's arrest was issued, met with grim nods of approval. Kalen played his part. He was the stern king, the unmovable peak. But inside, he was a chaos of conflict. His wolf paced and snarled, desperate for the night, for the meeting, for her. His mind replayed her every word, her every defiant glance. He saw her hands glowing with a power that should not exist, performing a miracle of mercy. You sit on a throne built on the bones of the peaceful. Was it true? His grandfather's journals spoke of the lumen as a strategic threat, a rival source of influence that needed removal for the good of the Pax Unified. He had never questioned it. History is written by the victors. But what if the victory was a massacre? What if the threat had been a lie? As twilight descended, painting the sky in shades of violet and fire, Kalen slipped from the palace. He used no hidden doors this time. He was the Alpha King. He walked out the main gate, nodding to the guards, saying he was inspecting the perimeter. A believable lie. Once in the forest, he shifted. His wolf was massive, a creature of shadow and sleek, dark fur, his eyes twin pools of molten gold in the gathering dark. He ran, not with the easy lope of a patrol, but with single-minded purpose. The land blurred beneath him. The bond in his chest was a compass needle, pointing true. The old watchtower was a skeletal finger of stone, pointing at the emerging stars, a relic from a war before his time. It stood on a wind-swept ridge, overlooking the vast expanse of his kingdom. As he shifted back at its base, the sheer scale of what he ruled hit him. Forests, mountains, rivers, thousands of wolves, a legacy of iron and blood. And he was here, in secret, to meet the one wolf who threatened to unravel it all. He didn't have to wait long. She emerged 3 days. The words were a ticking clock in Alara's mind, a frantic rhythm that matched her pounding heart as she pushed deeper into the blackwood. This forest had a different soul than the woods near the palace. The trees here were ancient, twisted giants, their branches forming a canopy so thick it choked out the midday sun. The air was heavy, silent, and cold, smelling of damp rot and something older, petrified magic perhaps, or forgotten prayers. The sunken temple, a place even the rogues spoke of in hushed, fearful tones. It was here or nowhere. Behind her, the ragged group moved as quietly as they could. Finn, still pale, but walking under his own power, a testament to her magic. Old Lyra, her breath wheezing slightly. Sable, her eyes constantly scanning the shadows, a knife glinting in her hand. And others, a dozen more souls she had gathered from various hideouts, their faces gaunt with hunger and etched with the permanent wariness of the hunted. "Are you certain about this, Lyra?" Lyra whispered, her voice barely disturbing the oppressive silence. "The stories, they say the temple is guarded by more than stones." "The stories also say the Alpha King's patrols execute rogues on sight. I'll take my chances with ghosts over his silver blades." Her words were braver than she felt. Every strange sound, the creak of a branch, the distant drip of water, made her jump. But Kalen had bought them this time. With his treason, she couldn't waste it. The ground began to slope downward, the path becoming a treacherous slide of wet leaves and moss-slicked stone. Then, through a final curtain of thick, thorny vines, they saw it. The sunken temple wasn't just built in a hollow. It looked as if the earth had swallowed it whole centuries ago and only reluctantly revealed its roof. Half submerged in a murky, still bog, its stone walls were black with age and slime. Carvings, strange swirling symbols that were neither wolf nor man, were just visible beneath the grime. A set of wide, cracked steps descended into the dark water, leading to a gaping archway that promised only darkness. A chill that had nothing to do with the colds crept down Alara's spine. This place felt old. It felt watchful. "We can't stay here," Sable muttered, clutching her knife tighter. "This is a tomb." "It's sanctuary," Alara insisted, pushing down her own dread. "The patrols won't follow us here. The old magic masks sense. We'll be safe." She had to believe it. She led the way, picking a path along the relatively dry stone at the bog's edge toward a partially collapsed section of the wall that offered entry above the waterline. The interior was worse. The air was frigid and stale, thick with the smell of stagnant water and decay. Slivers of light pierced holes in the vaulted ceiling, illuminating swirling motes of dust. Strange faded murals adorned the walls, depicting scenes she couldn't decipher, figures with light emanating from their hands, wolves lying peacefully beside them. It made her heart ache. It looked like the stories her mother had told. They found a dry chamber deep within, a circular room with a cracked stone altar at its center. Exhausted, the group collapsed, passing around meager rations of dried meat and foraged roots. The fear in the room was a tangible thing. Alara moved away, needing space. She stood before a section of the mural that was less damaged. A tall figure, its features worn away, held out hands from which stylized rays shone over a crowd. A healer, a lumen. Was this one of their places? Had her people built this? A soft footstep sounded behind her. Finn. "He let us go," Finn said quietly, not looking at the mural, but at her. "The Alpha King, he saw you. He saw your magic, and he let us go." Alara didn't answer. How could she explain the watchtower, the shared devastation of truth, the bond that was a chain and a lifeline all at once? "Why?" Finn pressed, his young face serious. "Kings like him don't show mercy, not ever. What did you do?" "I showed him the cost of his mercy," Alara said finally, the words tasting like ash, "and he didn't like the price." Before Finn could ask more, a sound echoed through the temple corridors, a low, resonant thrum, like a giant plucked string. It vibrated in the stone beneath their feet. Everyone froze. It came again. Thrum. Then a voice. It wasn't heard with the ears, but felt in the mind. Ancient, dry, and layered with echoes. "Who disturbs the sleep of the silent ones?" Panic erupted. Rogues scrambled to their feet, grabbing children, pressing back against the walls. Sable raised her knife, her knuckles white. Alara Yuled turned to ice. The stories were true. She stepped forward, putting herself between the voice and her people. "We seek sanctuary," she called out, her voice echoing in the chamber. "We mean no disrespect. We're just lost." A long silence followed. Then from the deepest shadow in the corner of the room, something moved. It wasn't a shape at first, just a gathering of darkness. Then it resolved into a figure, tall, impossibly thin, wrapped in tattered mossy robes that might have been stone or cloth. Its face was hidden in a deep hood, but 2 pinpricks of soft blue light glowed within. It was a warning, a spirit of place. Her mother's tales spoke of them, guardians tied to sites of great old magic. "Lost," the warning intoned, its head tilting. "You carry the old light, the binding light. It has been long since such a one walked these halls." "You know what I am?" Alara breathed, hope warring with terror. "I know the scent of soul clay, of hands that mend the torn fabric." The warning glided closer, no footfall sounding. The rogues shrank back, but Alara held her ground. "You are of the lumen, the last thread." "Yes," Alara whispered, tears pricking her eyes at the recognition. "My people are gone." "Gone by claw and fire," the warning agreed, a wave of profound sadness emanating from it. The wolf of iron saw connection as a threat. He feared the truth you could unravel. It stopped before her. "And now you run from his blood?" Alara nodded, unable to speak. "You may shelter in the sunken place. The stones remember kindness. The waters will hide your scent. But the wolf of iron seeks you. His hunters are relentless. And there is a shadow in his court that hunts for different reasons." A new fear, sharp and cold. A shadow. "One who does not seek to capture, but to consume." The warning's blue gaze seemed to pierce through her.
The old king's hunger did not die with his flesh. It was passed on. You are not just a fugitive, child of Lumen. You are prey. The words hung in the frigid air, more terrifying than any patrol. Before she could ask what it meant, the warning seemed to dissolve, its form unraveling into shadows and mist until only its voice remained, echoing faintly. Beware the one who smells of empty places. He comes. And then it was gone. The oppressive feeling lifted slightly, replaced by a deep, unsettling dread. "What was that?" Lyra quavered. "Our host," Alara said, trying to sound calm. "We have permission to stay." She left out the warning. They had enough fear to carry. The group, too exhausted to question further, began to settle, finding nooks and crannies to claim as sleeping spaces. The temple was safe for now, but Alara's mind raced. The old king's hunger, passed on, a shadow that consumes. Kaelin's grandfather, Vorian, what had he done, and who had inherited his hunger? She thought of the council, of the cold-eyed elders, of Beta Cyrus's fervent belief in eradication. Was one of them more than they seemed? Was that why the laws were so cruel, the hunt so relentless, not just for order, but for sustenance? The bond in her chest gave a faint, anxious pulse. Kaelin, he was in that court, surrounded by those shadows. He'd bought her time, but at what cost to himself? In the palace, the cost was becoming clear. Kaelin stood in the war room, a map of the territory spread before him. Cyrus, Commander Jax, and Elder Theon were with him. "The southern passes have shown increased activity, as you predicted, my king," Jax was saying, pointing to the map. "We've engaged several rogue bands there, but the western forest, near the Blackwood, it has gone quiet, unnaturally so. Our trackers lose the scent, their wolves become disoriented." "The Blackwood is a blight," Elder Theon rasped, waving a gnarled hand, "full of old bad magic. The rogues are probably dead, swallowed by the swamp. Good riddance." Cyrus was silent, his eyes fixed on Kaelin. "You redirected significant forces south. On a hunch, Kaelin. It allowed whatever was in the west to vanish." His tone was neutral, but the accusation was clear. "The witch is in the Blackwood. I can feel it, and you let her slip away." The air in the room grew tense. Kaelin met his Beta's gaze. "You act on intelligence and strategy, Cyrus, not feelings. The southern threat was credible. If rogues..."
The silence in the sunken temple was no longer just the absence of sound. It was a living, listening presence. Ilara's nights were filled with the soft, desperate breathing of the injured and the frightened. Her days were a blur of grinding herbs, whispering healing words, and watching the murals as if they might suddenly speak clearer truths. The warden's warning was a constant chill in her blood. Beware the one who smells of empty places. Finn's wound was healing cleanly, the silver poison fully drawn out. He moved with more strength each day, but a new tension had settled in his young shoulders. He had taken to standing watch at the temple's broken entrance, his eyes scanning the oppressive green of the Blackwood. "It's too quiet," he said to her one afternoon as she checked Lyra's aching joints. "Even the bugs are silent, like they're holding their breath." Alara felt it too. The forest's normal, hidden life had gone still. It was the calm before a predator's strike. "The warden said the waters hide our scent. Perhaps they hide us from everything, even the forest itself?" Lyra patted her hand, her skin like paper. "Child, some silences are a shelter, others are a tomb. We must learn to tell the difference." The difference became terrifyingly clear that evening. Sable was returning from a cautious foraging trip, her arms laden with edible fungus and bitter greens. She burst into the central chamber, her face ashen, her breath coming in sharp gasps. She dropped her haul, the mushrooms scattering across the stone floor. "Ilara," she choked out, "at the tree line, by the old bog." Ilara was on her feet instantly, Finn right behind her. "What is it? Patrols?" "No," Sable whispered, her eyes wide with a horror that went beyond fear of royal soldiers. "Not patrols. It's a grave, a fresh one." They followed her back along the treacherous path, their movements swift and silent. Just inside the first ring of twisted black trees, where the bog began, the earth had been disturbed. Not dug, but torn. Claw marks, huge and savage, raked the mud and moss. And there, half submerged in the peat, was the body of a royal tracker. Elara's stomach turned. The wolf was still in his shifted form, a large, tawny beast. But something was profoundly wrong. His fur was dull, matted not with blood, but with a strange grayish film. His eyes were open, milky and vacant, and the worst part was the smell. Not the smell of death and decay, but a hollow, dusty odor, like an attic sealed for a century, like an empty place. Beware the one who smells of empty places. "He's dried up," Finn murmured, horror in his voice, "like all the life was sucked right out of him." Elara forced herself closer, her healer's instinct warring with revulsion. She reached out, not to touch, but to sense. She closed her eyes, extending the barest whisper of her magic. What she felt made her snatch her hand back as if burned. Nothing. There was nothing there. No lingering spark of a soul, no echo of pain or fear, not even the natural, slow dissipation of life energy. It was a complete and utter void, as if the wolf's very essence had been extracted cleanly and utterly. This wasn't a fight. This was consumption. A twig snapped in the forest behind them. They spun, hearts in their throats. But it was only a scavenger bird, hopping away through the undergrowth. The normalcy of it was jarring. "We need to move," Finn said, his voice firm. "This thing, it's hunting, and it found one of the hunters. It's close." Elara nodded, her mind racing. The warden's warning, the empty tracker, the note Kaelin had received, they were all pieces of the same monstrous puzzle. Something was hunting in the Blackwood, and it wasn't just looking for rogue fugitives, it was feeding on wolves. And if it could sense life, could it sense the unique, potent life force of a lumen's magic? "Back to the temple," she ordered. "Now, we seal the entrance we've been using. We only use the underwater passage from now on." As they hurried back, a new, more personal terror gripped her. The bond in her chest gave a sudden sharp tug, not of fear, but of distant, furious alarm. Kaelin, something was happening to him. In the palace, the trap was closing. Kaelin stood in the center of the grand council chamber, but he did not sit upon the raised dais. He stood on the main floor, surrounded by the seated members of the High Council. It was an intentional positioning. He was not holding court. He was being assessed. Elder Theon presided, his withered hands steepled. Beta Cyrus stood to his right, a statue of grim loyalty. To the left was a wolf Kaelin had always disliked, Lord Malachi, a distant cousin from a minor branch of the Voss line. Malachi was impeccably dressed, his smile never reaching his cold gray eyes. He always smelled faintly of camphor and dust, a scent that set Kaelin's teeth on edge, the scent of empty places. "The continued absence of the Lumen Witch is a festering wound," Malachi said, his voice smooth as oiled silk. "Every day she eludes us, the whispers grow, whispers that our elder's will is not what it once was, that his focus is divided." His gray eyes flicked to Kaelin, devoid of warmth. "My focus is on the stability of the realm," Kaelin countered, his voice echoing in the vaulted room. "The rogue activity in the south has been crushed. The mines are secure. The witch is one fugitive in a vast territory. She will be found." "By whom?" Malachi asked innocently. "Your Beta's trackers seem to be running in circles, or worse." He paused, letting the implication hang. "There are reports, you see, disturbing reports from the Blackwood border. A patrol went missing. Just one tracker returned, babbling about shadows that drank the light from his brothers before they vanished completely." A cold knot tightened in Kaelin's stomach. The note. The shadow circles the sunken star. Cyrus shifted.
The Blackwood is superstitious nonsense. The tracker was likely driven mad by swamp gases. The others probably fell into a bog. Perhaps, Malachi conceded with a slight bow of his head, but it is strange, is it not? The one place your trackers cannot go, the one place that hides sense, is the very place logic suggests the witch would flee. And now men die there. It would be a shame if more resources were wasted or more lives lost due to misguided priorities. The threat was veiled, but crystal clear. Malachi was circling, using the disappearances to undermine Kaelin's authority and paint his protection of Alara as a costly weakness. Elder Theon's ancient voice rasped into the tension. The law is the law. The practice of soul binding is a corruption. The witch must be captured and executed to reaffirm the strength of the throne and the purity of our ways. His milky eyes found Kaelin's. Strength, Kaelin, is not just in the muscle, but in the will to do what is necessary, even when it is personally distasteful. They all knew. They might not have proof of the bond, but they sensed his conflict. They smelled it on him. "I have issued the warrant," Kaelin said, the words like stones in his throat. "She will be found." "Good," Malachi smiled. "Then you will not object if I take a personal interest in the hunt. My own house guards are well versed in dealing with peculiarities, and I have a particular fascination with old, lost things. I would see this lumen relic for myself before she is extinguished." Ice flooded Kaelin's veins. Personal interest, a fascination with lost things. This was it. Malachi was the shadow. He wasn't just a political rival. He wanted Alara. He wanted her magic, to devour it, as the note had said. "The hunt falls under the command of the royal guard," Kaelin stated firmly. "It is not a matter of private houses." "Of course, my king," Malachi said, his smile never fading. "I merely offer my assistance. In these trying times, we must all support the throne." He bowed, the picture of loyalty, but his gray eyes held a glint of cold hunger as he straightened. The council was dismissed. Cyrus lingered as the others filed out. "He's making his move, Kaelin," Cyrus said quietly once they were alone. "Malachi has always coveted the throne. He thinks you're vulnerable. This witch, she's the crack he's trying to widen." "He doesn't just want the throne," Kaelin said, staring at the door through which Malachi had left. "He wants her, for something worse." Cyrus frowned. "What are you talking about?" Kaelin couldn't explain the note, the warning, the empty, hollow smell. He just knew. He's going to the Blackwood, with his own men. He's not going to capture her for execution. Understanding dawned on Cyrus's face, followed by a storm of conflict. His duty to the law warred against his loyalty to his friend. "If he acts outside your command," Cyrus said, "then he is in treason," Kaelin finished, a plan forming, desperate and dangerous. "You will take the royal guard, follow him, monitor him. Your orders are to ensure the witch is captured alive and brought to me by any means necessary. If Malachi interferes, deal with him." It was an order that could start a civil war. Cyrus understood the magnitude. He searched Kaelin's face. For the kingdom? Kaelin met his gaze. For the truth. It wasn't the answer Cyrus wanted, but it was the one he needed. He nodded once, a sharp military gesture, and left to muster his guards. Alone in the vast chamber,
the air in the sunken temple tasted of wet stone and fear. Ilara had ordered the main entrance sealed with rubble, leaving only the submerged passage as a way in or out, a chilling, dark tunnel that filled with black water at high bog tide. It was a defensible position, but it felt like a trap, a tomb, as Sable had said. The bond in her chest was a constant, frantic drumbeat. Kaelin's emotions were a distant storm, anger, determination, a sharp edge of fear that was not for himself. He knew the shadow was close. She could feel his resolve, a mountain against the coming gale, but she could also feel the strain. The politics of his court were a cage tightening around him. Finn and the other able-bodied rogues took turns watching the underwater passage and the few high, narrow windows that looked out over the stagnant bog. They reported nothing but the oppressive stillness and the slow creeping tendrils of evening mist. It was Lyra who saw it first. She was tending a small, smokeless fire in a deep pit, cooking a thin broth. Her old eyes, clouded with age, were sometimes sharper than the rest when it came to seeing things that weren't quite there. She went still, her spoon hovering over the pot. "Ilara," she whispered, her voice thin as a spider's thread. Ilara followed her gaze to the far wall, where a section of the ancient mural depicted the Lumen healer. In the flickering firelight, the painted rays emanating from the figure's hands seemed to pulse. Not a trick of the light, a soft, rhythmic glow, growing brighter with each beat of Ilara's own heart. She approached slowly, drawn by a deep ancestral pull. The figure's face, once worn to a smooth blank, now seemed to have the faintest suggestion of features, kind eyes, a sorrowful smile, her mother's smile. A voice, not in the air, but in the memory of her blood, whispered, "When the stone remembers, the blood must answer." Hesitantly, Ilara reached out and placed her palm flat against the mural, over the painted heart of the Lumen figure. The stone was warm, not from the fire, but from within. A jolt, like the striking of a hidden bell, rang up her arm. The painted rays blazed with silver light, illuminating the entire chamber. The rogues cried out, shielding their eyes. In that light, Ilara saw. Not a vision, but a knowing. The temple was not just a sanctuary, it was an archive, a library of souls. The Lumen of old, knowing their end was near, had poured the essence of their knowledge, their history, their very magic into this sacred place, into the stones and the murals. It was a legacy in trust, waiting for one of their blood to awaken it. Knowledge flooded into her, complex healing symbiosis, the true nature of the soul bond between wolves, the art of strengthening pack connections without dominance or fear, and deeper, darker knowledge, records of their last days, of King Vorian's emissaries coming not with threats, but with poisoned honey, offering alliance, of the slow realization that the king did not want their allegiance, he wanted to consume their unique power, to graft their soul-binding ability onto his own bloodline in a twisted, parasitic ritual. They had refused, and so he had ordered the fire and claw. The last piece of knowledge was a warning, seared into her mind with the heat of final desperation. The ritual Vorian sought was incomplete, a vile thing that fractured the soul. It created not strength, but a hunger, an endless, empty need to steal the life force of others, to fill a void that could never be filled. It created a shadow walker, a being that smelled of dust and absence, that left husks in its wake. The light faded. Ilara staggered back, her hand falling from the wall. The painted rays were once again just faded pigment, but the truth was blazing inside her. Malachi, the cold, gray-eyed lord, he wasn't just a political enemy. He was Vorian's true heir, not in title, but in cursed hunger. He was the Shadow Walker, and he wasn't hunting her to kill her. He hunted her to complete the ritual his grandfather had failed to perform. He meant to consume her soul, her lumen essence, to sate his eternal emptiness and claim its power as his own. "He doesn't want me dead," she breathed, the horror dawning fully. "He wants me eaten." Before the panic could take root, a new sound echoed through the temple, not from the entrance or the windows, from below. A deep, grating shudder, as of stone moving on stone, followed by the slurping gush of water being displaced. "They're in the tunnels," Finn said, his voice deadly calm. He hefted a sharpened stone in one hand. The underwater passage. Malachi or his men had found it. Outside the Blackwood, under a moonless sky, Beta Cirrus moved his royal guards with lethal efficiency. They were a silent, silver-tipped arrow aimed at the heart of the wood. Cirrus's orders warred within him. Capture the witch, protect the king's interest, counter Malachi. The lines were blurred, but his loyalty to Kaelin was a clear, unwavering line.
They found Malachi's camp first, a cold fire, supplies abandoned in haste, and they found the second desiccated body. This one was a blackwood creature, a large stag, but the effect was the same. Whole, unmarked, utterly drained of life, smelling of void. Cyrus knelt beside it, his face grim. This was no swamp gas. This was an abomination that made the forbidden soul-binding Ilara practiced look like child's play. Kalen was right. This was something worse. A scout melted from the shadows. Lord Malachi and a dozen of his house guards entered a bog stream half a mile north. They haven't surfaced. The stream must feed into the temple. Cyrus made a decision. The king had said by any means necessary. We follow. Teams of 2, watch each other's backs. If you see that gray era, you disengage and signal. We are not equipped to fight magic. Our priority is to intercept the target before Malachi does. Capture is preferable, but if Malachi reaches her first, he met his captain's eyes. Deny him the prize. It was a death sentence for the witch, and they all knew it. Better a clean death by silver than whatever Malachi planned. Cyrus felt the weight of it, the betrayal of the king's unspoken hope, but his duty was to the kingdom's safety, even from nightmares. They entered the cold, black water, following the trail of emptiness. Inside the temple, chaos erupted. The first of Malachi's guards erupted from the pool in the lower chamber, a dripping, snarling monster of a wolf. Sable was on him before he could fully shake the water from his fur, her knife finding a seam in his leather armor, but more followed. Men in dark, non-reflective mail, their eyes blank with a fanatical obedience. The rogues fought with the desperate courage of those with nothing left to lose. They used the temple's terrain, dropping stones from ledges, leading pursuers into narrow, pitch-black side passages. But they were healers, orphans, and outcasts, not soldiers. They were outmatched. Ilara did not fight. She protected. She stood before the old and the young in the central chamber, her hands raised. She did not call the gentle healing light. Instead, she pulled on the temple's memory, on the stored power in the stones. A barrier of shimmering silver energy, like heat haze, sprang up in the archway leading to the inner sanctum. A guard slammed into it and was thrown back, yelping as if burned. "Stay behind me!" she shouted to Lyra and the children. But the barrier was draining. She could feel the temple's ancient power, vast but diffuse, hard to channel. She was a single key trying to turn a massive rusted lock. Then he arrived. Lord Malachi did not crawl from the water. He seemed to materialize from the shadows themselves, stepping from a dark corner as if the stone spat him out. He was dry, untouched by the struggle. His gray eyes scanned the chamber, passing over the clashing wolves with disinterest, until they landed on Ilara, on the silver barrier, on her glowing hands. A smile of pure, avaricious delight spread across his face. "The last ember," he sighed, as if greeting a lover, "and such a bright one." He walked forward, and the fighting seemed to part around him. A rogue lunged at him. Malachi didn't even raise his hand. A faint gray mist seemed to exhale from the man's skin. The rogue stumbled, his face aging decades in seconds before collapsing into a withered half. Malachi breathed in deeply, and a tinge of color returned to his pale cheeks. "A crude appetizer," he said, his eyes never leaving Ilara. He raised a hand toward her barrier. Where his fingers touched the silver light, it dimmed, not shattered, but was absorbed. The gray mist coiled from his fingertips, eating the magic, drinking it in. Ilara cried out, feeling the drain as a cold suction in her own soul. She pushed more power into the barrier, but it was like trying to fill a bottomless pit. The silver light flickered, weakened. Finn, seeing her distress, broke from his fight and charged Malachi from the side. Malachi didn't turn. He simply backhanded the air. A pulse of gray energy hit Finn mid-leap, and the young wolf was thrown across the chamber like a doll, slamming into the altar with a sickening crack. He did not get up. "No!" Ilara screamed. The barrier wavered. "It's useless," Malachi crooned, stepping closer. The barrier was now a faint, dying shimmer. The smell of dust and old tombs washed over her. She could see the hunger in his eyes, a bottomless, yawning need that terrified her more than any threat of